Everything's coming up to Timberwolves. Yeah, in the zone. Simple dedication to the team when you're in the know. To Timberwolves. Yeah, in the soul. Lifting all the positivity for the Wolves to grow. So, where we going from here, man? We listen week to week to get the clearest to clear. Recaps, got that. Soundcap, got that. Team ads, got that. So tell me what they do not have, huh? How dare you? Foolish question to ask, but I don't mean to go brag. But boy, they got all the stats, and they could go all the way back from KG to Zerbiak. And all I'm saying is that the cast a one-stop shop for my Timberwolves. Timberwolves. Ain't a thing falling, everything's coming up. Timberwolves. Timberwolves. Falling from the autumn, ain't nobody gonna stop them. It's the Timberwolves. Timberwolves. Phonies, you can spot them, they the sheep under their clothes. Timberwolves. Timberwolves. Talk a lot about them, y'all don't really know. Let's go.
Welcome in to another Everything's Coming Up Timberwolves podcast, and I'm joined, as always, by Chris Emerson. Chris, how we doing?
We're optimistic. I'd give it that.
Good. And, of course, we're always joined by Jared Good. Jared, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm nice enough to have this new friendly backdrop from our friend Chris. Kind of hooked us up with some cool little backdrops. I got to hang mine up a little bit better, but hey, it's a little
It's a start.
push from the shove, right? We're
it's
up there.
It's a work in progress. Also, I love it. I like how we have all three generations going on there.
Yeah.
With the new
I think
school,
he planned
that. Yeah, it's almost like someone planned that. And we have a special guest tonight. We got Blake joining us. Blake, how you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
We're doing good. So let's start with you before we get into it. Talk a little bit about your Wolves fandom and kind of your background with the Timberwolves, just so people can know.
Sure. Well, first, thanks for letting me win your guys' casual fan contest to be on here, give my armchair expertise sort of thing.
Yeah.
But so I've been lifelong Wolves fan basically since I was a kid. KG, MVP, all that. Gone to Target Center my whole life through $5 college games when they've stunk, the Conyers,
Yep.
all the fun, basically. Ups, downs, and mostly downs.
There you go. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I've known Gabe from college, worked in same college radio together. Got the invite to come on. Happy to be here and just chat Wolves for a little bit.
Absolutely. And welcome to the show. So, guys, we got to talk about it. We saw it at the end of the – I should mention – sorry about the voice tonight. I'm going to let these guys mostly talk, but I'm working with what I got tonight. So coming off of the sickness, had to skip work today. But so obviously we saw it on the intro video. Karl Anthony Towns out, I would say 4 to 6 weeks. Chris, your instant reaction to that?
My instant reaction was, I think it can be good. Like literally when I saw him go down, I was like, oh, I think that's a good thing because it didn't look like it was a blown Achilles. It didn't look like it was, career threatening. And, as I might get into later, I think he's been kind of a source of a lot of the problems. So I think it might be good for him to take a step back and kind of watch it from a distance. And hopefully we can get some more continuity and he can step in and see where he can play.
I think it's interesting because we've seen this big ball lineup with Gobert at the 5, obviously, and Towns at the 4, and I think a lot of people's instant reaction was maybe we need to go smaller. My initial thought was we need to continue going with the big lineup because, we have these guys for I think at least the next 3 years. It might be longer than that even. So we have to figure out the 2-man big lineup, in my opinion. So when I looked at it, when I originally saw it, and we kind of have spoke about this in a couple of our groups, is how do we change the starting lineup? Do we go smaller? Do we let we've seen Utah have a lot of success with going smaller, playing Bogdan Bogdanovic at the 4 which was a smaller look, and you could kind of put slow-mo Kyle Anderson in that spot. And Utah had a lot of success with that. But for me, I think my instant reaction was we need to start a guy like Nas and split his minutes with slow-mo because they can't be on the floor at the same time, I don't think. And they've kind of been pretty clear about that with their rotations. So I think my original reaction was, obviously it sucks. I mean, you never want to lose an all-star or a caliber player like Karl Anthony Towns is. But I think the knee-jerk reaction for Wolves fans was, let's see how we respond, and then should we trade Cat? I'm not quite there yet. Obviously, this two-ball lineup or this two big man lineup hasn't worked out all that well for it, and I'll speak on that a little bit later, but why it hasn't worked. But I think instead of going smaller, I think we need to continue to go big because the having two bigs isn't going away. Like, we have these guys under contract for a long period of time. So I would be more curious to see how Finch comes out with the starting lineup the next game we play. And I would be in favor of Nas getting that look. And we are big Nas fans on this podcast. I know Blake might not know that, but a lot of us really like Nas on this podcast.
I can easily get on board with Nas Reed fandom.
But
right.
Generally speaking, he's a big guy, and I think we need to figure out having the two bigs. And my big thing is, and I'll speak on this a little bit later as well, but rotationally, how we recover when we get beat off the dribble. And I think that has a lot to do with our two big man lineup.
Right. So, Blake, a question for you. Who do you think will benefit from Cat being out? Like, who do you think could have a nice string of games here with Cat not being on the floor?
I think Gobert just like getting more like the ball more in the paint will do more. I think any of the starters, just Cat more often than not gets 20 plus points a game. So I think anybody that's starting, there's only one ball to share. I think any of those guys will get it a little bit more, get more shots up. Whether that's really that good for them, I don't know. Cat, I feel like, has been very good at his assists this year. I think he's been a better passer. I was kind of worried about that initially, of how well they'd share the ball when it was Ant and Cat and D'Lo and all these guys. But Cat has played a little less selfish at times, been better about his passing, I think. So I think some of the other starters will do better in that they'll get the ball more, but they won't have it from him to feed it.
Yeah, that's true. And but that's going to be interesting. You mentioned Gobert. Is that really the guy that's been feeding it to Gobert has been Cat?
That's true
in general. So that'll be an interesting adjustment. A little bit. We thought going into the year it would be the whole time it would be this D'Lo Gobert pick and roll kind of thing, but we've seen a little bit of that, but to varying degrees. Chris, go ahead.
I think you nailed it. I think that's something that we're going to have to see more. I think it will be nice now that we don't have Cat specifically, and maybe we will go Nas. I just don't think Finch likes Nas. Like, I just don't think that's going to happen. I think he's kind of in love with the vet, with Anderson. I think it's going to be Anderson, which is going to help with some ball movement for the overall team, which might be something that rubs off. I mean, remember when everyone had COVID and the bench guys came in last year, and we played really hard against some teams, and it was mainly just by sharing the ball, multiple pass possessions types of things. And I haven't been seeing very many of those at all. So hopefully Anderson will help facilitate that. But what I want to get back to is watching, maybe this whole new offensive strategy for Gobert really isn't the thing, like where we're posting him up or he's catching it on the short roll and trying to Euro step around a guy. Maybe that's not it. Maybe we need to just go to the straight old pick and roll, let D'Lo just beat the pick and roll to death. Because when I think of D'Lo, he's got to be, for us to reach our potential, he's going to have to be near his max potential. And when I think of D'Lo, like, what do you think of for his strongest skill set? It's really not shooting. Like, percentages will tell you that. It's not getting to the basket. He never gets to the basket. So it's got to be play creation and facilitating. So I need to see that heavy. I want to see him with the ball in his hands heavy. That'll, without Cat there, who's been doing a lot of facilitating, maybe it'll be more on his back. I don't know, but we need to see something happen. And I'm hoping that Cat stepping down and maybe a guy like Anderson coming in will be a catalyst for ball movement, or maybe Cat not being there and his kind of mopey attitude that he has so often. Maybe with another
Yeah.
vet like Anderson and Gobert in there, maybe that attitude won't be as strong on the team, So we'll see. I'm really excited to see how it goes, and get well soon, McDaniels, because we need him back as fast as
Yeah.
possible too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Two terrible one was against the Warriors, you can argue, but two terrible defense performances without Jaden McDaniels. Jared, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say we kind of talked about the biggest beneficiaries, and for me, it's D'Lo. You're taking 15 to 20 shots away with Cat not being on the floor, and Chris has mentioned in previous podcasts that Rudy Gobert's pick and roll rate is like unbelievable. So, like Chris mentioned, I think you're going to see a lot of high pick and roll with Gobert. And D'Lo, and then obviously Gobert rolling hard, but then you're going to be looking for these vets that can knock down shots. Your slow-mos, your Noels. I don't want to say Noel's a vet yet, but like your Torian Prince, I know he's hurt as well. Unfortunately, the Timberwolves have a lot of injuries right now. There's going to be a lot of moving parts. You might see Bryn Forbes play a little bit more, Austin Rivers. These guys can knock down shots if they're open, and we've seen them do it before. It's going to be a tough stretch. I think my initial thought process is let's see what the team looks like. Let's see how the team reacts and changes. And if we can hold our serve and go anywhere near 500 in the time that he is out, I think that's a big win for the Timberwolves. The West is tough, man. I mean, we've said it all. Hold serve, get back to 500, get your guns back, and then make a playoff push is where I'm at.
Yeah, absolutely. So one guy we haven't even really mentioned yet, who I actually think will be the ultimate, the guy who decides whether this ship goes down with Cat out. I mean, it's got to be Ant, right? Like, I mean, I put in the chat a set of car keys. This is his opportunity to really take over and become the guy. Like, he could be the number one guy on this team, and maybe Cat just goes in the fold when he comes back, and maybe we're in a better position. I don't know. What do you think about Ant's role, Blake? What do you think?
I've been pretty mixed on Ant this year so far. Mostly just like knowing he could be better. Like last year, it was is he going to pass Cat this fast at like 20 years old sort of thing and be the number one guy? And he's got the athleticism. He's got all of that. I think he has struggled in a few spots, though, primarily off-ball movement. He loves the ISO. He just loves to stand in front of a guy and either like bowl him over and just get an easy layup with his head down or pop up a three. And he can make threes some, and that's fine. But I really think he just needs to work on his off-ball, creating plays, cutting to the basket, whatever, letting other guys see him get open rather than just taking it from the top and either chucking it or just laying it up himself, which he can do some, but I'd like to see him have a little bit of a deeper bag than that, because I think you're right. He definitely is the one that can really steer the ship in the right direction.
And I think for all these fans that are calling for like Ant to be like, let's make this Ant's team. Well, this is the opportunity. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah. And I mean, I think he pretty much has a green light all the time. So I don't know how much actual like shot percentage and stuff is going to go up for him. But what I do like is I think there's always this kind of hesitation on who's the leader. Who's the alpha on the team, and Cat sort of by default has that role because he's been here longer. The franchise has championed him, forever.
Right.
And I think with him sitting out for 6 weeks is a really long time. And my guess is we're going to be on the deeper end of the 4 to 6 weeks, just knowing like these are young players and it's not like we're making a title run this year. So, I mean, it might be time that Anthony Edwards establishes himself as the alpha of the team. And I think that's something that needs to be done. And I don't, part of me wants him to be less selfish to get that role. I mean, there's a lot of times where I'll see Rudy completely pin a guy behind him in the post, and Ant will just dance on his guy at the 3-point line and not, completely miss the feed. And part of me wants him to be, more of a play creator. And then part of me wants him to just straight out just be a killer. Like when the ball swings to you, try to score every single time. Like that's all you're doing. Like try to average 40 points, just go all out,
Right.
like old school Michael Jordan, try to score everything, because we need a guy who can do that. I mean, D'Angelo Russell's not that guy. Gobert's not that guy. Noel is the only guy who can do that, but
inconsistent.
So inconsistent. So, I mean, we need a guy who's just going to be a hired killer. And maybe that will break him free of this kind of hesitant funk he's in where he doesn't know if he should take over early. Wait, I'm going to wait till we're down 20, then I'm going to get pissed and take over. I think it's going to be, maybe it's time to take over or try to be, locked in from the tip. I mean, there's a lot of things I'm hoping to see happen, and that's one of them. We'll see, I guess. We got a handful of weeks to figure it out.
Right. Blake, go ahead. You had a comment.
Yeah, a couple things. I totally agree with the we need a couple, like the D'Lo, Brooklyn, Jared Allen pick and roll, but with Gobert, just let Ant do his thing. I haven't seen enough offense where it's just like this thing works, the other team can't stop it. Just do it, repeat it, over and over. And like there's got to be some sort of something we can pull a streak together here to get some runs off of, just some easy baskets. And I have not seen that enough this year. So I think finding those will be huge. The other thing, I haven't been on here before to know how much you guys have talked about this, but the leader thing, I've talked to other friends about that, other Wolves fans about that as well. I don't know if you guys have talked Pat Bev to death.
A little bit, but go ahead. I wanted to know your take anyway.
So I'm a Pat Bev fan, as he's great to have on your team. You don't like him when he's not, sort of thing. But he definitely was that veteran presence we need. I think Ant can be somewhat of a leader, but he's only 20 years old, and I don't know if he cares to be. I think he cares to be the best player on the court. I don't think he cares to be the alpha dog in the locker room sort of persona. I think Cat wants to be the leader. I'm a big Cat fan, but I don't think he's a great leader as much as he would like to be. And I guess my question to you guys kind of is, do you think the leader position, because I think this is huge for Wolves fans to talk about, do you think this is seen as much on other teams that they all have that guy in that role, or not as much? Because to me, it's a problem, but also going from Pat Bev to a vacant seat is a pretty black and white comparison.
Jared, why don't you go first? What to answer that question? Then I'll go to you, Chris.
I kind of expected Rudy to step into that role and be that vet and to control the emotions. That's one thing that Timberwolves have always struggled with, and we've been talking about this for 3 or 4 years now. Our emotions the best of us, and they always kind of have. We are always arguing calls, and I really kind of expected Rudy to kind of look at Cat and say, hey, you know what, we're going to be different this year. And I didn't really see that. So I kind of expected Rudy, just because he's more of a defensive guy, much like Pat Bev is too, doesn't have a significant role on offense. It'll be really interesting for me to see what happens in the next couple of weeks with Cat out. Not to say that Cat is a fearless leader, but he's always kind of wanted that role and he's never really excelled in it, in my opinion. But I don't know. So I think about this team and the way it sits now with their roster, and I think we look a lot like the Jazz when they won a ton of games and we're the 1 seed. We don't have the most talented roster anymore, but we still have the pieces, much like that were around Gobert. You had Mike Conley. D'Lo is very similar to him. You had Anthony Edwards, who's very similar to Donovan Mitchell. You have Royce O'Neal, who's similar to like a slow-mo. And then, J-Mac when he's healthy. I mean, to me, it'll be really interesting to see how the team responds, because I think it could go one or two ways. I think we could either win a lot of games because things are different. I think we could lose a lot of games because we don't have the offense and we look terrible on defense. But it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, and it really does make me scratch my head because I don't know what to expect next.
Mm-hmm. Chris, go ahead.
Blake, I think you nailed a couple things. I'm not sure if it was intentional or not. Two points that you mentioned. One, you're talking about the leader and how Cat wants to be it, but you don't know if he is it. And same as Jared when you're talking about Rudy. I think all those things are tied. And talking about other teams, I don't think it's very often that you have a number one pick on a team who is crowned the franchise player, and then 7 years later or whatever it is, you get another number one pick that's like maybe a franchise player. Because now you kind of have this, well, who's the franchise building around kind of idea. And Cat wants to be the leader for sure. Cat wants to be a superstar. I think the problem with Cat is it's not in him to be either one of those two things. And I think he tries to I think he has a picture in his mind what a leader looks like and what a leader sounds like and how a leader acts. And I think he has a picture in his mind how a superstar looks like, acts, and behaves. And I think those pictures he has in his mind, he tries to act out those roles so that people see him as that. Like if I'm dressed in, Balenciaga to head to toe. Yes, I know they're in a controversy now. Not important to me. But and if I'm all over Instagram with a famous lady in all these tropical areas, and if I'm, at press conferences saying all these cliche terms that are nauseating to see, almost like it's ripped out of a sports cliche of the day like calendar. Those are things leaders do. But and complain about calls because you should be getting better calls because you're a superstar. These are all acts that I feel like he puts on, and I don't think any of them are true to him. And I think a lot of that is just he's a young guy, and maybe 3, 4, 5 years from now, just as a human being matures, maybe he'll be better in his own skin and find his role. So I don't think he's ever going to be a leader. So I hope it's Ant. But I think it might be Rudy. And I think we're 20 games in, and Rudy came from France playing in the EuroLeague. So he didn't really have time to build any rapport. So it would kind of be, he's smart enough to know that you can't be traded from a team who has kind of given up on you in a way to the Timberwolves and then walk in the door and act like you're some sort of leader. The only reason that worked with Pat Bev last year was because he didn't threaten any of the stars. Like Karl Anthony Towns wasn't threatened by, a guy averaging, 8 points a game. He knew that he was way ahead of Pat Bev skill wise. So yeah, I'll let Pat Bev run his mouth and do his little thing, but that doesn't threaten him. I think Rudy threatens him. I think Anthony Edwards threatens him to take that top spot. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out with the leader. I think that's why we brought in Rivers. I think that's why we brought in Slow-Mo. I think that's why we brought in these veteran voices. Maybe not like, a leader that has as much panache or as much, flamboyance as, as Pat Bev has, but hopefully guys that can settle the locker room. But another thing you mentioned, Blake, was the offense and how, I wish we get back to just that pick and roll, and I hope we do. But I think part of what Finch is doing is this whole flow offense that's his plan, and he almost purposely stays away from pick and roll, even though it's painfully obvious that would be the most effective thing to do. I think he's looking at this as more than a 1 year, development process. And I think that's something fans have to understand, where multiple defenses for a young team is a terrible idea in season mode. Same as this flow offense, trying to get that working, or even two bigs, not a good plan in season mode. But if you're playing franchise mode and you're expecting maybe us to reach our peak in, mid year 2, maybe year 3, that's what I think he's playing for. And I don't know if it's a correct play. I think that's what he's doing, though. I think it might be best just to keep it simple and just pick and roll teams to death. It's just, once you come to playoffs times and you're getting high level playoffs and you're running just one system, it's easy to defend. So I think he's hoping that the pain of this process wasn't going to be so intense, but I was hoping that it will add, a higher ceiling for the team overall.
Mm-hmm. Blake, go ahead. You had something?
Sure. Yeah. I think your Pat Bev point on he didn't threaten anybody on the court talent wise is extremely valid, because he's played, I think, statistically pretty garbage for the Lake Show right now. I would love to have him back. Doesn't
He's
even have to get minutes.
In the NBA. He's statistically like the worst player in the NBA right now.
Yeah, and I would take him back just to have him be in the locker room and hang out and just be that presence that we need. And I do agree too. Rudy could maybe be the guy, but it is tough when you are going into a locker room of guys that have been there from last year, a lot of returning guys, not everyone, but a lot. And you're the new face, and you're just saying, hey, I'm running this ship now, especially when you have guys like Ant or Cat that are talent-wise supposed to be very good, may have certain levels of a presence in their locker room that you may not have just yet. I will say too, a thing I think one of you brought up was the Ant versus Cat, who's kind of the guy we're building around. And I think that's a good timeline question on, like, Ant is in year 3, Cat is directly in his prime. Trading for Gobert, I think, definitely plays to Ant, and maybe just this franchise not being good, that we need wins and we need them sooner than later. But it is, I feel like an example that I've seen that's interesting is of doing this right, as much as I hate to say, is like Golden State. They just won a championship. They have all these older guys, and then they're going to give Jordan Poole a bunch of money, or guys like that. So I don't think it's impossible to have. I think it is interesting you brought up that we get 2 first-year guys, one in his prime, and then we get one at the same time. But I think that could just be a great long-haul type thing. It doesn't need to be one or the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I want to mention, people are flocking for Patrick Beverley back. Man, I'd rather have Malik Beasley back right now. Like the way he's shooting in Utah. Oh my gosh. And now I'm sure will cool off a little bit. But anyway, Chris, go ahead.
I have two follow-up questions for you, Blake. One, if let's say, Pat Bev is on a veteran minimum right now, so we could bring him back for, Nathan Knight straight up contract wise.
Right.
But let's say that happened, and Pat Bev comes into the locker room. How do you think that, or would you think that would possibly stunt the overall growth of Anthony Edwards as a leader, or even Karl Anthony Towns as a leader, to bring in this artificial leader again, who obviously has a timeline of maybe a handful of months left in his NBA career? That's one question. And then the second question is, I forgot what that was. Stick on that one question.
Sure. So I think would it stunt Cat's growth as a leader? Sure, absolutely. To have a different voice being as louder than you. Sure. And yes and no. He's only 20. I think Pat Bev is, for better or worse, a role model that Ant really looked up to. They definitely seem to get along very well in the locker room. So I don't think he would take anything away from Ant there. I don't think Ant is at the age. I think in 2, 3, 4 years he can be that guy in the locker room. Maybe even next year, but I don't think he's old. Like, he's not that age is everything for being a leader, but he just doesn't have that experience yet that some of these other guys have. And then I will say too with that, I might have forgot my other thing. If I remember, I'll let you know.
All right, go ahead.
I would say it would stunt Cat. It would not stunt Ant, and I don't think it matters too much for Ant quite yet.
Jared, go ahead.
Yeah, well, if we trade for Pat Bev, we're making the playoffs because Pat Bev has never missed the playoffs. So either he's making it with Lakers or he's making it with us. That's all I got.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point, man. It's just like I said, I like you were saying, Chris. I am not 100% against bringing back Patrick Beverley, particularly because he's not going to cost anything. That's the first thing. Second of all, I mean, actually, that's the main thing. He's not going to cost anything. The only thing that worries me is that he's been playing so bad. Like he's been such a bad, and I would hate for him to take away the shot from like J-Mac or something like that. I don't know, but Blake, go ahead.
I remember my other thing. So on that note of Pat Bev is not going to get that many minutes. He's going to hang out in the locker room, be a good presence. I don't know if this is the best comparison, but a few years ago when KG made his final return to Minnesota, I don't think he was getting that many minutes or getting that many extra wins for us. Tayshaun Prince was here too. Those guys were like 40 at the time. But they were helping like Cat and Wiggins and those guys like grow into better players. And I think that's kind of where you'd want to see Pat Beverley is not getting 35 minutes a night and chucking up threes, but just being that guy that's just a veteran presence.
Mm-hmm. Chris, go ahead.
I would say I'm gonna disagree with a couple of those things, but that's fine. I think Pat Bev is washed. I think the team moved him for a reason. I think if we wanted to keep him as a veteran leader, we could have done that. Obviously, it would have been a little harder to make the money work with the trade, but I think he wore out his welcome, even with management and the team. I think it's when he was going into the playoffs saying like it was his team, he was leading the team to the playoffs. That kind of stuff is fun and all, but not when you have 2 number 1 picks that are future superstars in theory. You don't want an old guy saying he's the one leading the team. This team isn't going to win a title with him doing that. But it doesn't matter. And same with KG. I think that was more of an act for the fans than reality, because the 2 players you mentioned that he helped were 2 players that pretty much have shown that they need a lot more help all the way up until very recently. Wiggins was Wiggins, who, I mean, we had to give up a first just to get rid of him because he had no motivation. And Karl Anthony Towns is the same mopey, lazy guy the whole time. So if KG helped, then he would have needed to be training wheels their entire career because it didn't rub off that fast.
Mm-hmm, for sure. I'm going to try to steer the conversation in a different direction just because I've been wanting to ask this question for a while. What do we do with Brian Forbes now, or Brian, whatever is Bryn, whatever. You just put a Y in there, and for the sake of all of us. But can he be a decent player off the bench, or is he just dead weight? Because he had one decent game, but I swear he misses so many open shots. I don't know. Well, what do you think of him, Blake?
I have not liked him so far. I don't know if we've made a whole lot of plays where we're creating shots for him too much and he's just missing open threes or what. I was hoping he'd be just the discount Malik Beasley, which is not the case so far. I was like, okay, Beasley's getting paid $15 million a year or whatever. This guy's getting paid $1 million. Great. It's the same guy. Definitely not the same guy.
Yeah.
I'm not totally out on him, depending on how well this offense can keep moving around, see if he can get a few wide open shots and start to get him to fall. But so far, I'm not sold on Bryn Forbes.
Okay, Jared, what do you think?
Bryn Forbes is a vet that can kind of shoot. He reminds me a lot of a player like Danny Green, who got paid late in his career because he could shoot. Obviously a lot worse defensively, but he's a shooter. sometimes not all shots go in. I mean, we've seen that. We've shot poorly, and that's been a big reason why the Timberwolves have not been good to start. Shooters shoot, man, and right now he's a shooter that ain't shooting.
Yeah, that's true. Chris, anything to add on that?
Remember what Jake Layman gave us last year?
Nothing.
That's Bryn Forbes is going to give us this year. He's just going to be a guy on the bench. And truthfully, I hope that's what Austin Rivers starts giving us too, is just the guy on the bench. I don't think that – I think, an athletic career for an NBA player or for, a professional athlete is a very short period of time. And I think Bryn Forbes had his time and, yet be happy with the career you have. He just doesn't have it anymore. I think the situation would have to be completely perfect. I think we would have to be a lot of double in the post, kick out to him standing still, shooting a three type of thing to show value. And his defense is horrendous. So I don't want to see anything from him at all. I would be more than happy to replace him with something we can find in the G League, or even bring up Minot, who is actually kind of killing it in the G League right now. And I would love to see him replace McDaniels as a hot take in the starting lineup if McDaniels is out for a couple more weeks or a week or so.
That's true. Now, I did hear McDaniels is upgraded to questionable for tomorrow.
I saw that.
So let's say McDaniels is in the lineup. Let's say he doesn't get hurt. Let's say all pieces except Cat are available. What would be your starting lineup? And we'll go with everybody, but start with you, Chris.
I think it's what it's going to be. I'd be surprised if it's not Gobert, Anderson, McDaniels, Edwards, D'Lo. I mean, I would be very shocked if that's not what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you got Nas in his same role as a backup five. You bring up Garza,
I'd love to see him play.
Oh, the Timberwolves, the fans are going to go bananas when that white boy goes nuts. And then, you just play off that. And I think, truthfully, if Prince is out, I want to see Minot get some minutes as just a hustle guy, a defender, a hustle guy on the perimeter. He's shooting 43% from three on 3 shots a game right now, which was a big improvement from him. I'm assuming they're all corner threes. He's averaging 3 offensive rebounds a game, 17 points. This is all, obviously in the G League, but
G League,
and a half. Like, that's the kind of energy I want to see out there. That's the kind of energy we don't have out there right now. And maybe it takes some scrub to come in and inject that energy, kind of like how Vando did last year.
Chris, let me ask you. So you would be more, because I know the consensus is people are more excited about Garza. Would you be more excited about Minot than Garza?
Yeah, I think so, because I think he has more of an NBA role. Garza, let's not pretend like Garza is a rookie. Like, he's been around the league and there's been multiple teams that have given up on him, and he's always been able to score. Like, he's been able to score probably since come out of the womb. That guy was putting up like 35 and 15 in Iowa for like the 6 years he was there. Or was it Purdue? I don't know. He can play.
It was Iowa.
Yeah,
Iowa. He
could play, but I just don't know if the upside's there. I like him, but I need defenders. I need a guy that's long, that can defend on the perimeter and can hustle. And that's what we need right now. I mean, with Gobert and Cat, long-term things, Garza's literally just a piece we're going to move later, or just let some other team, take up the development we did for him. I don't see him as a long-term piece with those two guys here, unless he takes over Nas' role next year and we let Nas walk, which is very possible.
That's true. Jared, what do you think? What starting lineup would you go with? Is it the same? Or? No, I'm not saying what they're going to do, but what would you go with?
Well, it's not what they're going to do, but this is what I would go with. It's D'Lo, Edwards, assuming J-Mac is healthy. J-Mac at the 3. I'm putting Nas at the 4 and Gobert at the 5. And the reasoning behind it is defensively we look really been really slow rotating with these. And I kind of talked about this at the beginning, but a lot of teams are using a high pick and roll, and then we are getting murdered with slow rotations, which has led to a lot of open threes. We talk about this every time we have a podcast, but somebody has a career high against us. Porzingis had matched his career high, which was 40 against us. So that was a big thing, in a lot of these games. And obviously the Warriors did much of the same to us, knocking down wide open threes. But I think that the two big lineup is the future for us. Obviously, like whether Cat's healthy or not, we need to figure out how we can rotate faster with these two bigs in the lineup. So I think I know it's not what's going to happen, but I think it's what should happen. Like if we're serious about our future, we need to figure out the pieces that are in place and how to correct them and how to fix them. And I think the only way you're going to do that is mirror Cat with Nas.
Mm-hmm. Chris, you had some? Go ahead.
I love that take. I mean, because if we're going to reach the pinnacle of this team, unless something crazy happens like trading Cat and building around Edwards and McDaniels and youth, which that's a bold move. So let's just cross that out. But yeah, I think the two big thing, we need to get that to work if we're going to reach the pinnacle of what this plan is. And Nas adds things that Cat doesn't have. Nas is watch Nas come down the court on offense. He will sprint into his pick. He will sprint in there. He'll pick the guy. He'll sprint on his roll. He works hard. He's flying around. He's a way better rim defender. I think there's a real possibility that Nas will play better will play better with Nas than what Karl Anthony Towns has been giving us. I'm also a huge Nas guy, so that's part of it. I think he makes the better play more often. He makes a simple play, the simple pass, rotates the ball. I love what Nas does. I just don't think it's going to happen, but I love that take, and I'm all for it.
Blake, what do you think? What would be your go-to starting lineup? Everyone healthy except Cat.
Sure. I'm gonna go with what Chris initially said there on the D'Lo, Edwards, J-Mac, Slow-Mo, Gobert. To me, the Nas question is very much of an offense versus defense. I very much agree that like Nas can space the floor, he can shoot threes. They can kind of keep working on that offensive scheme they think they want while Cat's out, with Nas is a pretty easy place in there. The reason I would put Nas not in the starting lineup is more on the defensive end. Like Chris said, he's a good rim defender, and I think Gobert is going to get the brunt of the minutes with Cat out, and you're going to still need that rim defense when Gobert's out. And if you shift him over and give him starting minutes too, I don't think there's anybody else that you're really going to want to be sitting in the paint blocking people. So I can see it for offense and defense who you'd want there, but I would say Slow-Mo I would start.
There you go. Chris, any rebuttal to that, or should I wrap it up?
No, it's going to be a real wait and see what happens. And I'm kind of, truthfully, this is probably the most excited thing I've been to watch Timberwolves for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I want to see what happens, stir the pot a little bit. And one thing we have to remember is we have a lot of practice time. We've got, I think we have 2 games in the next 10 days or something, and we're at home for all that. So we're going to have a ton of practice. We're going to be able to put some stuff together. Finch probably got 20 games to get a look at what happened, doing right, what we're doing wrong. Hopefully he'll tweak some things and we'll come out of this flying. We'll see.
Hopefully. Blake, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I would say, just real quick on Chris Finch, I hope the fans aren't too far down on him yet. I'm still a Finch believer, and what I think we're seeing on the court isn't always what he wants to happen. I was driving listening to an interview he did the other day where he was like, we need Ant to move off the ball more. Like, we're talking about in film every day. Like, these are things that are happening in practice. Like, these should be translating to games. So I don't think his head's in the wrong spot. And then the one other thing I just want to bring up really quick, I really hope Jaden McDaniels is back. I thought he was going to be the kind of borderline, is he a starter? He's still young sort of thing, but that guy's effort, like in every possession to keep the ball alive on offense, like his shooting, like he's definitely working harder for his spot than, and maybe it's because he feels like imposter syndrome or do I deserve this spot versus these other guys, but the amount of hustle he puts in is just awesome versus some of these other guys.
Yeah.
Speaking off the ball,
ahead.
D'Lo for the last 4 games, I wrote it down. I've been meaning to talk about this. He has been, watch him off the ball. He's running off. We have him running off picks. We have him running off pin downs. He's doing the stuff off the ball, the little things that we've been asking him to do. I've been really impressed with D'Lo the last, couple games. I mean, he win or lose, shots going or not, it looks like he's trying to be a different style of player. Which hopefully that also rubs off on Ant, because like you said, Blake, he needs to be more dynamic in roles other than give me the ball and spread the floor.
Mm-hmm. So I think with that, we'll leave it there. And I think we'll wrap it up basically for the sake of my voice. I think we got to do it, but Jared, thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. One thing that I want to just touch on quick, as kind of a party ways thing, if you're a Timberwolves fan, or if you watch Timberwolves basketball, look at us playing defense this next week more so than playing offense. We're playing a lot of sink-in defense, and we're really struggling with the pick and roll and rotating. That's one thing that I see a lot with the Timberwolves from what I've seen this year is we're slow to rotate and we're always a step behind. I notice when we're on offense, teams are a lot quicker to move and rotate. So I think if we can figure out that and fix that with it, when 2 bigs are on the floor, I should say, maybe when you see Gobert next to Nas, if we see it, it might be a if or not, because we might not see it. But I think that's very important for the Timberwolves is defensive rotations and on-ball defense with that pick and roll. I think that's what we're struggling with. But moving forward, it's going to go one or two ways. It's either going to work out okay, or it's going to be really bad. So I hope it works out okay.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Chris, thanks so much for joining us as always.
No problem. Hey, remember that first place Jazz team everyone was saying we made a bad trade? Well, they're 9th. We're 10th. One week after they were first, they're in 9th place in the West. So maybe the shine rubbed off on that a little bit.
Yeah, I was looking at Beasley's stats as well, and they are not where they were at one point. And Blake, you're a great guest. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Blake. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. This is the Everything's Coming Up Timberwolves podcast. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. Tell a friend as well. And follow us on Spotify so you never miss an episode. And as always, go Wolves.